it's really a pleasure. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure. And B'Sheknas Adar Marbim Basimcha. When Adar comes, we should increase in happiness. So we are very happy that we have with us Rabbi Dr. Shimon der Hollander, a very good friend of mine for many, many years, and a friend of many people who are on the Zoom now, who are familiar with him and knows him. A scholar, a person who knows in depth Judaism and Islam. He's a professor at Hunter College in these topics, and also he's a gentleman, first class. And if you have him as a good friend, then you have a really good friend with you. So we are really in a treat because we as Jews want to know exactly how the whole world works, because the whole world was created by God, and therefore going into other sciences besides the Torah is really, it is the Torah. It is knowing everything that God has created. So without further ado, it is a great honor to have with us Rabbi Dr. Shimon der Hollander. B'chabod.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, for your insightful and wise words about that. Is really, really very impressive. So let me thank you first for this amazing. Something's wrong with my. Okay, it doesn't matter. But this amazing opportunity and honor to speak to you, and especially about a topic that I find quite interesting, and so I hope you all enjoy the lecture. So the topic is the Esther story in Islamic sources. This could be, in the beginning when I started working on this, because it sounded like an interesting topic, but I found out very soon that this could be an extremely short lecture because Esther does not appear in the Quran or in Islam. So, I mean, thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this lecture.
We will.
Okay, but it doesn't mean that the Esther story is not known and has not been mentioned in the Islamic world. So we're mostly not talking about the Quran. We're talking about other sources. But let me first give some attention to some events that happened not too long ago, all in our recent lifetime. By the way, this is in the city of Hamadan, which is the city of in Iran. There is the well-known tomb of Esther and Mordechai, and it's a place of pilgrimage for Jews and also Muslims, of course against the will of Maimonides, but so people go there to pray. And a number of years ago, in actually 2008, the Iranian government made this into a national heritage site. So not everybody was happy by that. This is a Jewish place, and why is this now all of a sudden Iranian heritage site? So a few years later, there were some in 2011 there were some demonstrations, and this was in front of the building, and people they write here in Persian, Holocaust. 77,000 Iranians were killed with big crosses, stars of David. The number mentioned in the Megillah is not exactly 77,000, but it's close enough. I mean, this is not a big deal. But yeah, so they saying actually this is horrible. We're not going to honor Esther and Mordechai. They killed all these people of our nation. Now, this calmed down, and it's still a heritage site. So in, when was that? 2013, there was a whole thing going on with, did the Holocaust happen? Did it not happen? It was debated by people in Iran, and sometimes still is. This is the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Javad Zarif, and he wrote, he sent greetings to the Jewish community of Iran, wishing them happy Rosh Hashanah, happy New Year. And he also said that he has assured the Jewish community that he acknowledges the Holocaust and that it really happened. And so that was very nice. But although, of course, we wish that it didn't happen, but okay. So, but somebody else was very angry, and this is a notorious Holocaust denier. His name is Muhammad Ali Ramin. And he says to this foreign minister of Foreign Affairs, if you begin your term by wishing the Jews a happy new year, you will end up eventually blessing them on Purim, the slaughter of your helpless people by the evil Jews. So yeah, the story of Esther does play a part in these discussions. Now, very, very interesting for us Jews, very interesting event. This happened in 2015. And that was the time that America had to decide, are we going to have a deal with Iran? Are we going to let them develop their nuclear, because they promised it's only for peaceful purposes. And Benjamin Netanyahu spoke in front of US Congress on March 3rd, was the day before Purim. And he says, tomorrow night on the Jewish holiday of Purim, we will read the book of Esther. We will read of a powerful viceroy named Haman, who plotted to destroy the Jewish people some 2,500 years ago. Today, the Jewish people face another attempt by yet another Persian potentate to destroy us. What did the Iranians think of that, right? They responded, and this is the foreign minister again, Jawad Zarif. Benjamin Netanyahu distorts not only the present, but also the past, and even the Jewish scriptures. He accuses an entire nation that has saved the Jewish peoples 3 times. The book of Esther relates how it saved the Jews from a plot hatched by Haman the Agagite. He really read the book carefully, because what is he now pointing out? He's actually saying Haman is an Agagite, not a Persian. So Benjamin Netanyahu was wrong. It wasn't the Persians. It was foreigners, not Persians, who did this. We saved them. So he turns the whole story upside down. And this is kind of interesting how the foreign minister of Iran is correcting Benjamin Netanyahu on his knowledge of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, right? Isn't that interesting? Secondly, Cyrus the Great saved the Jews from captivity in Babylon. And third, during the Second World War, when Jews were slaughtered in Europe, so he's here acknowledging once again the Holocaust, which is, you could read over it, but this was a very significant thing. Iran gladly took them in. So this is just interesting because it is all quite recent and these discussions are going on still. So, but Purim does play a role and has played a role throughout the ages to some extent, although nothing to do, of course, with Zionism or the state of Israel and stuff. Okay, so let me see. So we're going to have here a few sources. We're first going to still look briefly at the Quran, and you're going to be surprised why you said Esther is not in the Quran. All right, I'll explain that very shortly. Secondly, we're going to look at Muslim historians. And then thirdly, if we have time, it all depends, then we're going to look at ancient Persian storytelling because there are very interesting parallels there. Although I think the first two are the more important, so we'll leave the third if we have time. So let's first start with the Quran. In the Quran, there is no, as I said, there is no Esther, there is no Mordechai, there's no Zeresh, there is no Vashti, no Haggai. There is, however, Haman mentioned. Haman is mentioned in the Quran. It rhymes, Haman in the Quran. But so he is supposedly according to the Quran, a boastful, corrupt infidel who is a high-ranking, the highest-ranking assistant, not of Ahasuerus, but of Pharaoh. Now you will think, what? Say what? So how is this? Is this a bit confused? And Pharaoh tells Haman in the Quran to build a very high tower from which he can reach heaven, and so to prove that the God of Israel doesn't exist. So we have Haman, who is in Persia, in our knowledge. We have Pharaoh, who lived in a whole different place and most likely another time. And we have the Tower of Babel. There's quite a few stories are mixed up here, Quran. But so we're going to see what. So and for some people, the evil king who ordered the building of the Tower of Babel was Nimrod. So, and also Haman is mentioned 6 times, 2 of them in Pharaoh and with the Tower of Babel, and 2 he's mentioned with Korah. So we have Egypt, Persia, Babel, and the Sinai Desert all in one story. Now you think, this gave and is still giving quite some ammunition to missionaries online who try to point out that the Quran cannot be correct and that it mixes up so many places and times and periods and has no clue. And of course, Muslim, apologists will say, no, you have it wrong. This is God's word, and God is not mistaken. And they say now, they say that the Haman, that's at least an answer that is brought up regularly nowadays. The Haman, that the Quran mentions in Egypt as an assistant of Pharaoh, is perhaps a different one as your Haman in Persia. Maybe there's no connection, right? So now this is also not too long ago. This is Dr. Maurice Bouquet, and he was a physician for quite some Middle Eastern rulers, and he was also an amateur Egyptologist, but quite accomplished still. And so when was it? 1822, the hieroglyphs had been that people had started to be able to decipher hieroglyphs, and then they found that, and he found actually that he discovered that there was a functionary in Egypt whose name was Ha-Amen, who was associated with building projects. And he says, whoa, a 7th century Arabian, meaning Muhammad, could never have known this, but still it appears in the Quran. So he took this as clear proof that the Quran must have been divinely inspired, and he converted to Islam. Little detail. Now, I personally, when somebody's called Ha-Amen, in Egypt, not so impressed. I'm not so surprised because there's many names with Amen or Amon. So Amun, Amon, Amen was the god in Egypt of heaven and the god of the sun, and it means the invisible one, sometimes called Amun-Re. And so you have Amenhotep, which has the word Amen or Amun in it, and you have Tutankhamun, which is also named after that same god. So there's very likely, I'm not an Egyptologist, but very likely that there are quite a few names, if you dig, and I'm sure people have done, names that appear in Egypt or in ancient Egypt with the name Ha-Amen or Amon, etc., etc. Okay, well, but I hope he was a happy Muslim. He's now dead. So, okay. But it's an interesting chapter. And people, of course, still bring that up. Muslim apologists saying, look, this was a very, an honest man, and he was very intelligent, and he found the proof. And why don't you all? Okay. Now, this, it is known, and it's been pointed out by many people in the past, that that there are quite some literary parallels between the story of Esther and the story of Joseph. So, for instance, in both cases, Egypt, Joseph and Esther, and Mordechai, of course, they rise to great power and prestige in prestigious positions in a strange land. That's a big parallel. And also, they seem to blend in. So Joseph marries the daughter of one of the high priests of On, and Esther marries, they're both intermarry, so to say, it seems. Of course, there are, I'm sure, Midrashim that say that Joseph's wife converted. But okay, it seems from the clear text that they intermarried and they blended in, and nobody knew their true identity. And also, both of them used their identity to save their people. Now, there's also seem to be some words that only occur in these two places, which is remarkable. I read, I don't know the words. I only know one word. One word is pukidim. So appointees. We have in Hebrew pukudim, but pukidim only occurs in Genesis 41, verse 34, and in Esther 2, verse 3. Okay. Now, other connections between Persia and Egypt. There are, Islamic historians who claim that Pharaoh was an Amalekite in the time of Moses. It says here, Al-Maqdisi, the person from Maqdis, he's called Maqdisi because he was from Jerusalem. كان فرعون مصر في زمان موسى رجل من العماليق. Pharaoh of Egypt was in the time of Moses an Amalekite. What's quite an interesting statement, right? And there were a few people who said that. Adam Silverstein wrote a book not too long ago, Veiling Esther, Unveiling Her Story, and a lot of the majority of my information comes from this book. It's a very interesting scholarly book. He says that perhaps Haman might have been a nickname for evil people. Why? Because it goes back to an old Babylonian myth in which two Babylonian gods, Marduk and Ishtar, tackle and kill and destroy a Elamite god, Haman. Now, if you look carefully, Marduk and Ishtar sound very much like Mordechai and Esther, and Haman sounds very much like Haman. So Esther was a Persian name. We know that wasn't really her real name. Her name was Hadassah in the story, right? Could it be that Mordechai was basically a nickname, was also not his real name, and that the story calls them Esther and Marduk? And the villain, maybe was that also a nickname, Haman, because maybe those names were given to point out a story of a very old theme of this, that Haman was here the bad person, and you could already hear from the name Haman when it's named. Oh, yeah, we know, we call all these people Haman, and Marduk and Ishtar, that you already know that they are the good people and that they're going to win eventually. Who knows? I don't know. So, but this could be. By the way, there's another theory that's not from David Silverstein's book. In the Megillah, we read that Ahasuerus, whose of course name was not Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus is I'm digressing a bit, but Ahasuerus is a Hebrew pronunciation of the Greek Xerxes, Ahasuerus, and Xerxes is a Greek attempt to pronounce the Persian name Chashayar-Shah. That was really his name. Chashayar-Shah became Xerxes, became Ahasuerus. Okay, ma'alesh, whatever. Okay, that Ahasuerus, hu Ahasuerus hamolech mehodu ve'ad Kush. So he ruled from Hodu, from India, and Hodu starts here at the Indus River, here on the right. Ve'ad Kush, Kush is Egypt, so that includes, Kush is, Ethiopia, so it includes Egypt. So the Shah of Persia was also the ruler of Egypt. And there actually was a Artaxerxes, Artaxerxes, I don't know how you pronounce it in English, who actually crowned himself, took on also the title, besides being a Shah, of Pharaoh. So it's interesting. So this is maybe a bit in defense of the of the Quran that there was a Shah, a Persian ruler, who also was Pharaoh. He started a pharaonic dynasty. Of course, that was not in the time of Moses. That's when the Quran talks about this Pharaoh and Haman. For them, it's in the time of Moses. It's still a different. We can't help them out of the problems to solve their problem because the time is still totally off. But it's still an interesting thing. Now, let's first look what are their approaches of the historians. The first approach could be to just ignore the whole story, because how can you actually talk about the story of Esther with a Haman in Persia if the Quran tells you, being a Muslim, you believe in the Quran, if the Quran tells you that this Haman wasn't in Persia, but was in Egypt? So the easiest thing is just leave that. If you write the story of the world, part one, you're going to leave that out. So, but that's not so interesting to look at the historians who leave it out because we can't really say much about it. So more creative ideas is a second one. Besides ignoring it, other people try to integrate some of the themes from the Esther story when they describe pharaonic Egypt in the time of Moses. So they say, okay, maybe the Jews have some information. Maybe it doesn't jive with the Quran, so it must be wrong. But maybe some things we can put in there. So we have some examples. Here is Kisari, which lived around the year 1000. He wrote, and this is about Pharaoh. The first to bow before Pharaoh was Iblis, which is Diabolos, which is the devil, who called the Pharaoh Lord. After him, Haman and all the viziers. You know, viziers is Arabic word wazir, of an Arabic word for minister, and all the ministers. But you're going to see the word vizier more often. So just in case you didn't know what it meant, it means minister. All the viziers and soothsayers bowed down. Well, that was an easy one for Pharaoh to persuade them. Then he called the elders of the Israelites, who came and also prostrated before him. Pharaoh then called the priests of Israel and said to them, I have heard that you obey me outwardly, but inwardly you disobey me. Bow down to me, or I will punish you with torture. Well, in the story, they refused and they were all executed. But later, Pharaoh has a change of heart, and he says to, maybe God softens his heart in contradistinction to the Torah. He said to Haman, bring me Amram, who is their chief. Amram, as we know, is the father of Moses, of Moshe, Rabbeinu. Amram came, and he was made grand vizier. And Haman and the rest of the viziers were placed under him. So it's an interesting thing. He took some of the themes there from a theme from the book of Esther. So the bowing down is one, although the bowing down is here to Pharaoh and not to Haman. But still, he takes the hero, the leader of the Jewish community, and places him above all the others. So first Haman was like very important, and now Amram became. So this is somewhat of a parallel between what had happened between Haman and Mordechai, although here Haman seems to get off alive. A third approach is, did I not miss anything? Okay, no, I did not. Is telling the Esther story with minor differences. So they took much more of the story, but just only small differences. A lot of these historians were Mamluk historians. So the Mamluk reign of the Mamluks was situated in Egypt, and also often big parts of the Middle East, but not all the way into Persia. And so they weren't so connected to Persian history, and they weren't so bothered with, with Persian inaccuracies, because the people from Persia who wrote, the Persian Muslim historians, also had information, as maybe we will see if we have time, information from their national history, from Persian history, and they wanted to also integrate that. So the people from the historians from Egypt and the Middle East, the Mamluk ones, they had less limitations. They had more. They felt they have more freedom to do what they wanted. So good. Well, where am I here? Okay, what? I did this. Where am I? Okay. Oh, yeah, here. So, An-Nuwairi was one, El-Qalqashandi and El-Maqrizi. Okay. So there's some differences, but basically the story is the same. One difference is that the Persian king is not called Ahashverosh or Khashayar-Shah, but Ardashir, which is actually Artaxerxes. And Artaxerxes, that's very interesting because the Septuagint, for those who don't know, is a very old Greek translation, originally translated into Greek by Greek-speaking Jews, but there are some differences between the Hebrew Bible and the Greek Jewish, originally Jewish Septuagint translation, but more differences in the book Esther than in any other book. And the Septuagint doesn't have Xerxes or Ahasuerus, but has Artaxerxes, a later Shah, as the king, the ruler during the time of Esther and Mordecai. So it's interesting that these people also, maybe they drew on the Septuagint. By the way, the Septuagint was translated in Alexandria, which is Egypt. So maybe there was still more influence of the Septuagint in Egypt where they were located. So it's speculative, but it could be. And also, now this is, I find this very interesting. So you have Haman for a Muslim in Egypt, but now you deal with the story of Esther, and there's a Haman there. But how can there be two Hamans? So our Haman in Persia with Esther is not called Haman; it's called Haimun. And so they solve it, and they say, his name was Haimun, but the Jews call him Haman. So they also kind of created two Hamans, and in order to distinguish them, they call one Haman and the other called Haimun. Now, a fourth approach is some people, few, admittedly few, actually told the Esther story. Oh, no, not few. Told the Esther story, the word few comes in number 5. Okay. The Esther story, they leave out Haman. That is an easy way just to do the Esther story, but not with Haman. You would think, what kind of a story are you left with? That's not so interesting. But okay, the famous and celebrated Muslim historian At-Tabari, very early, around 900, he has the following here. Ahasuerus, who was nicknamed the Sage, he was not like a dull, passive ruler as in the book of Esther. He's really praised here. He ruled over part of Persia, but he wasn't the top dog. He ruled under someone else, Bahman, and Bahman is a maybe legendary, but Shah, one of the first ones in the history of the Persians. So because Tabari did a lot of research and he also incorporated information from Persian history. So Bahman was the top ruler, and Ahasuerus ruled over part of Persia. He married the woman of the Israelite captives. Her name was Esther bint Abihail, which means the daughter of Abihail. So Bat Abihail in Hebrew. She was raised by an uncle who was also her milk brother. I'm going to explain that shortly. Their son Cyrus learned the Torah from Mordecai and embraced the faith of the Israelites. He studied under Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the three important people in the book of Daniel. He made Daniel the judge, bestowed him with all his power, and Cyrus began the destruction of Jerusalem. So according to and this is possibly based on Jewish midrash, I would think, is that Cyrus was daughter of the son of Esther, and therefore Jewish, and maybe that's why he. But of course, Cyrus was the first Persian ruler, so it cannot be accurate. Okay, but you see, there is no threat. There's no Haman. There's no threat to the Jewish people. Now, I would promise to go back to the term milk brother. What is that? A milk brother. This is a very important thing in Islamic thought. A milk brother is somebody who was nursed by the same woman, even once. If not maybe one sip, but if a baby nurses until he is satisfied, then the mother this nurse, wet nurse, becomes the milk mother of the baby, and he becomes her milk son. And if different people are nursed by that same woman, they're all milk siblings. And and her husband is their milk father. And so there's the whole level of nowadays, if you don't have milk and you can't breastfeed, a women can breastfeed, they will grab for the bottle and use that. But in the early days, you didn't have it. So you'd go to women who had recently had a baby, and the baby had enough milk, but they would, let's say, offer their services and nurse other babies. And if you continue that, your milk production will continue. And so there were a lot of wet nurses was a very common thing. There's a lot of laws. Can a Jew be milk mother to, like a wet nurse to a non-Jew, and vice versa, all these things. But it was a very common thing. So in Islam, milk siblings, so to say, are not allowed to marry each other. There was a bunch of years ago a case in Saudi Arabia that to women, a man and a woman, a husband and wife, were married for many years, and all of a sudden they discovered that they had been nursed by the same woman, and under Sharia law they were forced to have a divorce, to separate. Their marriage was annulled, and they could not be together anymore. So it's very painful. Okay, so why is this? And by the way, oh yeah, this is an interesting picture. This is the French king Louis XIV as a young boy, together with Queen Henrietta of England as a young girl, his milk sister. So it's always good to be related to royalty, so you don't easily go to war if somebody's your sister or your brother is in charge of the other country. But if there's no family relationship, just have the same wet nurse, and that's what happened here in 1600s. Now, there's a thing. This is a slide from my Megillat Esther video. I have these slides that come by. So look at the first words. So, Vayhi omen et Hadassah. Mordechai brought up Hadassah. Okay, that is an easy translation, but it's not. There's much more to it. Omen is not bringing up. Usually, you don't have the word omen. Omenet is a common word for a wet nurse, to nurse. If it is vatahi omenet et Hadassah, if it was a woman, it would be, and she nursed Hadassah. But omen cannot be. A man cannot nurse Hadassah. So people take it that she gave security to him or educated, but really it's puzzling. And there is, I believe, even a midrash that no, Mordechai really nursed Esther. There was a miracle, so he had milk and give to her, and so he could nurse her. Right, I don't want to visualize that, to be honest. But this milk this milk thing was solved by, and I'm sure that At-Tabari didn't make it up, but by saying, oh, there was a milk connection. Her Esther was her milk brother, not the nurse, the wet nurse, but the milk brother. It's an interesting thing. There's a connection there, I'm sure, with some pilpul within Jewish, midrash. Good. Now, 5. Now I repeat the word. Very few historians, and in this case it's accurate, incorporated the Esther story without significant changes. So it means that they basically took on the whole story and didn't have much, weren't bothered so much with the thing. So here's Al-Biruni, who died in 1048. He writes, this Haman was an enemy of the Jews. He asked the soothsayers which was the unluckiest time for the Jews. They said, in Adar, their master Moses died, and the unluckiest time of this month is the 14th and the 15th. Interesting, you might say, what? You just said he took on, these people incorporated the Esther story without much changes. Well, this is not in the Esther story, in the Megillah. The Megillah is like he threw lots. And here he asks the soothsayers, what's the unluckiest time for the Jews? But this is actually in a Midrash. It's in the Babylonian Talmud also mentioned in the Agadah of the Talmud. So, okay, we'll give him that. But the very rest of the story is all almost verbatim our Esther story in Al-Biruni. And the second example is the famous and well-known Ibn Khaldun, who died like over 300 years later. So, and he basically is just telling the story. From the reign of Cyrus onwards, Persian kings would supply, well, this is his introduction, would supply the Jews with that which they needed for the temple service. That's not part of the story, but then he continues, except for a short lapse during the reign of Ahasuerus. His vizier was Haman, was an Amalekite. Okay, also not in the story, but we've seen that goes back to a very long tradition in Islam. Oh no, that's not true. Haman is an Amalekite. If you interpret in the Megillah, if you interpret the word Agagi, which there are different interpretations, but usually Agagi is seen as Amalekite. So I was confused for a second, but this is totally following the traditional interpretation of Esther's story, of the Megillah. Saul had sought to depose them by God's order, meaning Agag. And for this reason, Haman was opposed to the Jews and plotted to destroy them. Mordechai, who was one of their leaders, had married off his milk sister, he have it again, to Ahasuerus, and encouraged her to beseech the king to save her nation. He accepted this and returned things to the way they had been. So, and the rest of the story, not going to tell the whole story because we're going to hear that next week, because the rest of the story is all pretty much the same, which is interesting that he brings up something that many people don't even know within Judaism, that this goes back, well, if this coming Shabbat in the Haftarah is the story of Saul, who was told to kill all the Amalekites, but he saved Agag, the king, and then Samuel came and was upset and did it for him. The tradition is that Haman is called an Agagi, that he supposedly would be a descendant of Agag, and that Saul didn't finish the job, but now a descendant of Saul finishes the job. Why? Mordechai, the Megillah goes, Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habira ushmo Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimei ben Kish ish minni. So there was a man called Mordechai, and he was the son of Yair, and the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was the son of Kish. So he was first cousin, third times removed or something. So basically, an indirect descendant of Saul has now to correct what his ancestor had not done, and so basically, the descendant of Saul is now doing to a descendant of Agag what Saul should have done. And the fact that that Ibn Khaldun has some knowledge of that background of the story is quite impressive. I'm impressed. Ibn Khaldun, good job. Okay, last one. Another approach, letting Haman and or Pharaoh move from Persia to Egypt. So some historians say, well, the Jews have Haman in Persia, and we have him in Egypt. Maybe he moved from Persia. But interesting enough, Pharaoh also. Okay, because we saw that early Muslim historians, or some of them, believed that they were related, that they were both Amalekites, right? That Pharaoh was also an Amalekite. Okay. So Al-Maqdisi, once again, late 900s, around the year 1000, in his story of Moses and Aaron, because that's in the Islamic understanding where this took place. I have heard storytellers claim that Pharaoh was a native of Balkh, and Haman was from Sarachs. So he wasn't. Pharaoh was basically not a title of the king of Egypt originally, was just a person from Persia. Supposedly, they were the first to bring watermelon seeds to Egypt, where they planted them, became wealthy, and took control of the cemeteries there. That cemeteries, I don't know what the origin is really. Well, it's a complicated origin, but it's going to come up more. They did not allow the dead to be buried unless a fee was paid. Later, Pharaoh came to rule over Egypt and appointed Haman as his vizier. So, I mean, this is a very general thing. So they came from Persia, they moved to Egypt, they were successful in farming. Egypt was a farmer, Pharaoh was a farmer. And also they, for some strange reason, they got rich on the funeral business, basically. Very remarkable. Okay, but we're going to look at Kisari again. We've seen him before. Now, this goes a little more detailed. I have heard that Pharaoh had gambled away all his money, so he was like a poor fellow. He then decided to sit at the gate of Egypt's graveyard and ask money from the funeral processions. He spread out a carpet, sat down, and charged everyone who came with their dead until he had amassed such much money. When the king's daughter died and was carried to the cemetery, Pharaoh, which is not our Pharaoh, was not a king, he was just a poor guy, prevented them to bury her. For this offense, the king, who is not Pharaoh, he's called the king, wanted to put him to death, but Pharaoh ransomed himself with the money that he had collected. Okay, now Al-Biruni is even more detailed. And it's not Pharaoh now it's Haman who does this trick. Here it's Pharaoh, but here's Haman. So they're contradicting themselves, but the story is similar, but interesting. Once a man called Haman, a man of no importance, traveled to Tustar to apply for a position. But on the way, he was held up. And when he arrived, the position was given to someone else. Now, he took his seat near the temples and demanded for every dead body that was to be buried 3 1/3 dinars. This went on until the daughter of Ahasuerus died, who was supposedly the king there, okay? When people arrived with her body, he didn't allow them to pass until they paid him what he asked for. The king was astonished at the great sum of money that he demanded. So he said, a man who gathers so much money over the dead is worthy to be my vizier and counselor. So he entrusted him with all his affairs and ordered his subjects to obey him. This is somebody who could extort a lot of money. That must be the perfect minister for me. Okay, going to good. And then here, now there's a Jewish source, Sefer HaYashar. I think there's a few different Sefer HaYashars, but this is late medieval. The oldest manuscript is from 1552, so the original is probably not extant and is probably older. But so let's say late medieval. And this Sefer HaYashar has incorporated a number of these aspects. It's very interesting to read. Now, this is Jewish, and he places this whole story in the time of Abraham. He actually says that before Abraham, we know that Abraham went to Pharaoh. It's mentioned in the Torah. Before, he said that Pharaoh was the first one to be called Pharaoh. That is what, I don't know who he is, but Sefer HaYashar says that. Okay. Pharaoh's original name was Rakion. It wasn't called Pharaoh. Rakion, from Rek, empty, so empty-handed, have nothing, who lived in the land of Shinar, that is in Babylonia, right? Because of poverty, he decided to travel to Egypt to apply for a position at the king's court in the time of Abraham, as I already said. As he arrived too late, he was very disappointed. He first tried to sell vegetables. Maybe that's where the parallel with the watermelons, but that did not work out. I'm skipping a bit. So he also goes into the funeral business. He also starts distorting, taking money from people who want to bury their dead, and he becomes very, very wealthy. He it comes here. He gathered 30 people and told them to charge 200 pieces of silver in the name of the king for each body they buried. In this way, he amassed great wealth within 8 months, silver, gold, precious gems, and a great force, armed and mounted. The people complained to the king, who then ordered Rakion to appear before him. Yeah, hold on. Rakion offered the king great gifts. He offered him 1,000 young men and women riding on steeds and dressed in precious attire. Also gold and silver and large amount of diamonds. So which king would not be persuaded by that? The kings and the entire court were very impressed. Right. The king said, who was the king of Egypt, not called Pharaoh, according to Sefer HaYashar, no longer shall you be called Rakion, have not, but Pharaoh, for you collect the taxes from the dead. I don't know. Farah. Okay. Later, Pharaoh overthrew the king and usurped the throne. So he made him first chamberlain, and then he made him vizier, and he gave him all authority. And then Pharaoh, of course, sees his chance. He kills the king and he takes over the throne. And according to Sefer HaYashar, it was then decreed that every ruler in Egypt should henceforth be called Pharaoh. Okay, now that is as far as the historians go. I have 10 more minutes, so I think we can do the rest of the slides. There was a Dutch Arabist, Michael Jan de Goede, I think in 1886, he wrote an article. Yes, that is correct. An article which he drew attention to parallels between the story of Esther and Thousand and One Nights. The story, it wasn't much noticed, but then later in the British Encyclopedia, he also wrote an article on it, and then he got a lot of released a lot of discussions, and he was later rejected, but also maybe rehabilitated a bit recently, because there's, even though his conclusions were maybe too far-fetched, but there's still some interesting things that could shed some light on the story. Okay. So what is the story of 1001 Nights? King Shahryar, he's sometimes also called King Bahman, and we saw King Bahman before, had a beautiful wife who was unfaithful to him. When he found out, he had her put to death. So as a result, he became lonesome, but he never again wanted to give his heart to a woman. So this is a bit similar to our story, right? Not that she was unfaithful, but still, she didn't listen to him. She didn't do and he also disposed of her, maybe not killed her, but he was also lonesome and had how do you call bonding, fear of bonding. He then had his vizier bring him a fresh virgin every night, with whom he sleeps. And he has her beheaded the next morning. Luckily, in Esther, they're not beheaded, but they're locked up in a harem, which is slightly less unpleasant. But once again, I think the parallel is quite obvious. The vizier's daughter, Shahrazad, volunteers, and she asks to tell the king a story. However, she ends the story with a cliffhanger, or sometimes she continues the next night, and then she ends with another cliffhanger or with an open end, so that every time the king wants to hear the continuation. This goes on for 1001 Nights, that's hence the name of the book, of the bundle, until the king decides to keep her alive. They have a son, and he made her his queen, and they lived happily ever after. Of course, she becomes queen, which is similar to our story. Not that she tells, there's no nightly stories, except for when the king cannot sleep and he has the book, the Chronicles read to him. And so that is a bit of a subplot. Because this 1001 Nights has tons of subplots, of course. There's a subplot, is in our Megillah, the plot of the two eunuchs. There are some plots within the story. Okay. A parallel is here that, like in the Esther story, the sin or the transgression of one woman, the queen, many women are punished. So women are punished in Esther with an edict that women always have to obey their husbands, and also the decision that all these women these virgins have to be rounded up and put and disappear in their harem, in the king's harem. And also, like Esther, Shahrazad saves people's lives, be it in a different way. So there are quite a few. And then another parallels are that in 1001 Nights, there's a lot of stories with lush banquets and with descriptions of, like in the beginning of the book, of how the palace has gold and silver and golden cups and beautiful curtains and all these colors and marble. That's the 1001 Nights is full of that. All right. In many, by the way, in many versions of 1001 Nights, the heroine is not Shahrazad, but is called Humay, who is then a Jewish girl and is identified often with Esther, Humay. Maybe you'll see it now. Okay, I will look at some storytelling. You have the Shahnameh, which is a book. It's a poetry, dates from the 11th century, but the contents are pre-Islamic, and some of them are from remote antiquity, even from very, 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 very old. The Shahnameh helps us understand the meaning of an obscure term in the Megillah. This is very interesting for those who like to go deep into things. In the Megillah, there's a mention of Rocheve Harechesh, riders of the Rechesh. Now, there's much discussion what is Rechesh. In my video, I translated as royal steeds, and I think that there's I didn't make that up myself, but Rechesh is a singular word, so it cannot mean. So the riders of the Rechesh, if you go Rechesh, if you the form is always just an a. So Yaled goes back to Yald. Let's say Yaldi. It's not Yaledi, but Yaldi. You know that if you have Yaled, the original form is just Yald, Yaldo, etc. So Rechesh goes back to an older form, Raksh or Raksh. And in the Shahnameh, there's a legendary hero called Rostam who rides a famous horse called Raksh. That's like. So it's some people think that this might be Rochebe HaRechesh, the riders of the Rechesh, a referral to this mythical or legendary horse. Okay, legendary, I should say, not mythical. The Shahnameh also talks about the historical rivalry between Iran and an arch enemy, Turan, which is like the Amalek of the Iranians. The commander of the Turanians is called Human. Interesting. He advises the Turian king, Piran, they're all called Turan, Piran, Human, to attack the Iranians. Human fights the hero, Rostam, who's the one who rides the famous horse, but he's killed and beheaded. So here's Human, who is the leader of the enemies of the people, in this case, the Iranian people. Okay, give that. And he takes on the hero of the Iranians, just like our Haman takes on the hero of the Jews, Mordechai, and he is killed and beheaded, and this, in our case, killed and hung, but that's a slight detail. He has another book, Bahman Nameh. This is about the book of Bahman. We mentioned Bahman twice already. Bahman being a legendary, very early Shah. Like many other Persian sources, it tells of an ancient Persian king, Bahman, who married a Jewess, Humay. And there you go again, Humay, right? That's said. Shahrazad in 1001 Nights is sometimes called Humay, and is then seen as a Jewish woman here in the Bahman Nameh also. And this Jewish lady succeeds him as a ruler and delivers the people from captivity. Yes, and identified by commentators, Tabari, and also Judeo-Persian poets as Esther. Here we have, I'm going to skip this one because the time is nearer. Darab Nameh. According to the story, Humay and Bahman have a son, Darab, which is Darius. Two emirs tried to kill the king, but then they are shot by arrows by the king's brother. So there is the plot of the, not eunuchs, but emirs. And the last one I'm going to mention is Samake Ayar, Samak the vagabond. There's also two functionaries who plot to kill the king. A third one reveals it, and the plotters are killed, very similar to our story. There's a vizier called Haman Wazir, the Haman, the minister, the vizier, although he's not a bad person here. There is a week-long celebration. There is feasts that people hold, and they distribute treats to each other. And then there's actually one more that I didn't have a slide, but it's called Viso Ramin. And actually what's interesting there is that there is a wedding that lasts 180 days, half a year, which is exactly as in our Megillah. There's a 6-month celebration, and people commentators have often said, oh, that has to be an exaggeration, but and it might very well be, but then it's a parallel exaggeration also in the book Vis and Ramin, Viso Ramin. Okay, conclusion. Well, it's a nick of time. I think it's timing worked out well. So the conclusion is, even though the Esther story does not appear in the Quran, there's still sources in the Islamic world, notably writings of Muslim historians that cover it in different ways. The discrepancy between the different locations and the different times in which Haman appears is dealt with by these historians in very different fashions. Interesting are several parallels that can be found in Persian sources, which contain pre-Islamic material that show many of the themes that also appear in Esther. So yeah, I said Esther in Islamic sources. Of course, the Shahnameh, the Bahman-nameh, and the Darab-nameh, etc. Those are really pre-Islamic stories, but they are written down and told into the Islamic world and are also incorporated to some extent by the historians that we mentioned before. So I took the liberty to include them within the realm of Islamic sources. And this concludes my lecture. So I hope, I wonder, and then I leave it up to the rabbi, if there's still time for question and answer, if there is any desire for that.
Very good. Thank you very much, Rabbi Dr. Shimon Ben Hollander.
Oh, very welcome.
What a beautiful presentation. Marvelous. Of course, we have questions because he brought so much richness here by going to all these sources, Islamic, Persian, and all kinds of sources, which open our eyes, particularly when we see a lot of parallels in different cultures. I have a question.
Yeah.
This is a hapax legomenons. This means this word occurs only once in the whole Tanakh. We don't see it anywhere, so it's very difficult to translate. But many scholars say that the Megillat Esther was written in Aramaic first, and then it was translated into Hebrew.
Uh-huh.
So maybe
I never heard that. Okay, sure.
Yes, and they found that from the way the phrases are written in the Megillat Esther.
Yeah.
It's not 100% simple Hebrew, but
No.
it has long verses,
Yeah.
which are really would fit into the Aramaic thing.
Oh.
But in any case, that's what many scholars say. So maybe that word rechesh, perhaps we can also look somewhere in Aramaic sources. Perhaps I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It could be. There are, it's possible. I mean, there are definitely themes in the Esther story that seem to parallel Persian themes in Persian traditional stories. So if you look at the names Mordechai, Esther, Haman, whatever, and so if that is. It would be a very big coincidence if that, it could also be that Rechesh is a very fanciful and heroic sounding term for horses, for really good horses because of this Raksh. possible. But yeah, I
How
don't
do you
have any
translate-
Aramaic word.
Very good.
I'm sorry. How is it translated in Megillah Rechesh?
Oh, Rechesh is in the Megillah. I mean, that's the word.
No, but what does it translate as?
Well, it depends on the translator. So royal steeds is one, but it is all. It's clear that they are horses. We know that
Oh, okay.
from the context. But
Right.
it's not a normal word for horses, and it's also not a plural word. You would think if it's rechesh would be a horse, and I use the word for horse, you would think rechashim, but it's rechesh. So I don't know. It seems to be a collective word, maybe. But yeah, people understand what's meant, and so they would say royal horses, but to understand what the word comes from, that is a different story. Yeah, but it's a good question. Thank you.
If anybody has a question, by all means, go ahead. If not, I would like to mention something very interesting, which has to do with Queen Esther. It's interesting because it shows here you have the Islamic world, which was very illuminated, very open, and really light when Middle Ages were in darkness. The Islamic world was in lightness. And but today, of course, unfortunately, many places where Islam is, they're still in darkness and still backwards. One of them is not long ago, about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, an Egyptian imam said we should boycott that chain of coffee, Starbucks.
Oh, Starbucks, yeah, because that was Queen Esther, and the crown was the How is it possible that people drink Starbucks and honor a Jewish queen in Mecca and Medina and everywhere? Yeah.
Exactly. So the stupid guy, he said that look at the picture of a Starbucks. It's Queen Esther, and everybody is drinking coffee from the Jews, and we should boycott completely now Starbucks. Starbucks should not be in any Muslim country.
Well, it's bad coffee anyway, so yeah.
That's true.
Yeah,
where ignorance goes,
Yeah, of course you can see, I mean, yeah. So you can, stupidity has no boundaries, right?
That's
So,
right.
you can always come up with things. Yeah, I have an Egyptian friend in Holland, and when he was in kindergarten, he was sitting in a circle. This is not about Queen Esther, but it's just your story reminds me. And the teacher said, children, if you find a pencil on the floor on the street with a little eraser on the end, would you pick it up? They said, yeah, we would love to have a pencil with an eraser. Oh yeah, we would pick it up. Well, you should not pick it up. Why not? Because at night the Jews come and they sprinkle these on the street, and when you start using them to erase them, they explode and then you're killed. A bomb and a pencil, yeah. Pencil bomb. But yeah, in any case.
I have a better one. When we were children, the history teacher, he says, people talk about Shakespeare, that he was a great, but Shakespeare was an Arab.
Sheikh Zabur.
Yeah, Sheikh Zabur. Sheikh Zabur, of course. He was an Arab, 100%.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good to see how really the Arab world was very advanced, like I said, in the Middle Ages, compared to the darkness of the Middle Ages. But unfortunately, they never reclaimed that beautiful thing today. It's very sad. But that's the story. Anyway, if anybody has any other question, please go ahead. If not, we are about to finish that beautiful session. Yeah.
Oh, on that happy note, and I wish you all a really joyful Purim Alegre, a happy Purim to everybody, a dignified Purim and a peaceful Purim.
Amen. 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 For all
I
of
would
us.
do not this year. I would propose not to kill 77,000 people, but let's leave that out. Let's just make peace. And yeah, I mean, it's good to understand. I mean, if you are a Persian and you read this, that look, that is a hard text for us. You know, in the olden days, it was probably, you know, you would write that down because it was a message. Don't mess with us because we win, and then if you're against us, you're going to get the same fate. But in our days, you know, it's not. It's just hard to proudly and joyfully read. And the Jews killed 75,000 people. It's just not hard. So yeah, every time has their challenges, and that's the price we pay for advancing.
Rabbi, I have a quick question. It's not related to Esther or Mordechai, but it's related to Megillat Esther.
Okay.
I'm a Persian Jew, and I remember last year I was reading Megillah, and it says, you know, when the Jews took over, and the non-Jews, 75,000 non-Jews converted to Judaism out of fear for their life.
Yeah.
So 75,000 back then translates to hundreds of thousands, you know, generation later.
Mm-hmm.
So then how do you know who in the Persian community, the Persian Jews, was actually Jewish from the first destruction of the first temple exile, and who was Jew because their ancestor converted during Esther and Mordechai conversion?
Yeah, the answer is it doesn't matter, because when you're Jewish, and maybe you did it. Look, when the Maccabees conquered the Edomites, they forced them, which is not something we endorse, but they forced them to convert. And the Edomites had been enemies, and so they against their will, they converted. So it's not valid. But then their children took on the Jewish identity, and they fought against the Romans with Jerusalem when Jerusalem was sacked, and they were killed for the sake of Judaism. And so their offspring became totally Jewish. So it doesn't matter that their ancestors might not have converted under the right intention, but if their offspring totally identify as Jews and they're recognized as Jews, and by the way, who can see the hearts of people, right? You could say, and by the way, out of fear of the Jews, you could also say out of admiration or out of respect for the Jews. That's a bit of a stretch maybe of the text, but it's not impossible that would be the intention. So first of all, so the conclusion is, did it really mean that they converted from the wrong motivation, or wasn't really out of fear? Was it for something else? Was it more like respect, which is not a bad thing to convert, at least not if you know what you're doing. Second of all, their offspring is indistinguishable, if they're still around, from other Jews and identify as Jews and are Jews by. So it really is not a relevant question at this point, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. By the way, did I pronounce the Persian word correctly?
Yeah, that was very good, actually.
Okay.
That was very good. What's your background?
Oh, I'm from Holland.
Holland?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought maybe you had like a little bit of a Hispanic. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, are you Sephardic or Ashkenazi?
I'm Jewish, but I follow the Sephardi tradition, right? Yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Thank you so much. No, this was a very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it.
No, nice to meet you, Arash. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Great, everybody. I wish you, everybody, thank you very much, particularly, of course, to Rabbi Dr. Shimon the Hollander. What a nice, and we expect him to come to Philadelphia and to spend the Shabbat with us.
Oh,
Okay?
I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Happy Purim. Bye-bye.
Happy Purim.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.